So we just read in the Mincha Torah reading, that's a preview for next week's Torah portion, about some skin conditions that one might receive or be inflicted with if they do certain activities. So we're going to look at the first source, which is in the box, number 1, from Leviticus, if someone can read it for us in either the English or in the Hebrew.
In the English or Hebrew? Okay, so in the English. Leviticus 13:2. When a person has on the skin of the body a swelling, a rash, or discoloration, and it develops into a scaly affection on the skin of the body, it shall be reported to Aaron, the priest, or to one of his sons, the priests.
Beautiful. Good reading. Okay, so you wouldn't go to a doctor when this happens. You go to one of the priests because it's considered a spiritual condition, and you wouldn't diagnose yourself. You'd go to someone of authority that can help you through this process of your diagnosis. We also learn here about the 3 different kinds of afflictions that can happen. Some commentators say that actually there's 4 different afflictions, and the third is how that force 2 can have like the kind of the category of it. So it can be like A or B. And so the third listing here makes both of the 2 go to that second level or like a second degree. But I want us to unpack a little bit more. What are these 3 elements that are listed here, these 3 skin conditions? And so if someone can read for us the Rashi on Leviticus 13:2.
I'll try the Hebrew first. Se'et o sapachat ugoi, shmot negaim hem ulvanot zo mizo. These are the names of tzara'at lesions, and one is whiter than the other.
Shkoyach, that was beautiful reading. So this is where the 2 that would be, the many commentators say these are the 2 ways they could be, and one is wider than the other. And then this next thing that Rashi talks about is how it takes it from being a condition A to a condition B. Someone want to read that for us? Just as you took a bite. All right, so I'll read it. So,
Okay. I'm sorry. Saye in Old French. Similarly, we find it. It forms a bright spot in the skies.
Beautiful. Okay, so Rashi loves to reference things to Old French. He had this beautiful vineyard. He was in the province of France. And so he likes to reference things to that. And he then brings in a text from Eov, which is about that it's a bright spot in the sky. So think about you have clouds and they kind of part and there's this brightness in the sky. So how it is that you have these 2 different conditions and they're both, one's whiter than the other, and then they can have this level of B where they're very bright. So something's going on there. And then the next part to this 3-part Rashi is that so was decreed by scripture that the ritual development of Sarat or lack thereof take effect only by priests pronouncing them. So as I said, that you wouldn't diagnose it yourself, you wouldn't have a friend diagnose it, you'd want to go to someone of a spiritual authority to diagnose it, that it's a serious matter. And, how often would the average person actually have a one-on-one with a priest? Maybe not a lot. So it could be maybe not for the right reason, but suddenly you're having this opportunity to be with someone of a great spiritual authority. So something about this, even though it's something that's bad's happening, you're getting this kind of win out of it suddenly. You get to meet with someone that normally you maybe not would have a chance to meet with. And more on that in a little bit. But let's look at number 3, the spiritual aspects of these elements. So Mefarshim, our commentators, have looked to the Tanakh to find usages of the above words for context, to derive a deeper meaning for these skin conditions. Kabbalah and Hasidic thought have built on these derivations for character development. During the counting of the Omer, which we currently are in, how can we refine our speech? So we don't have to worry about today being inflicted with a skin condition like this, but we can still take it as a guide of how we can use our speech in ways that builds connections versus destroys or creates disharmony. So for the first one, A, can I have someone read for us around that? You want to read? Great.
Shot, deriving from the Hebrew word to uplift. How are you uplifting yourself? This person puts down others in order to uplift themselves. The person is seeking validation.
Okay, great. So this is where someone wants to uplift themselves. They're seeking validation. So put down an other so that they can feel better. Instead of rising themselves up on their own merits, they feel if they put someone down, it makes them look higher. So from this word to uplift. Someone want to read for us B? Yeah.
Sapachat, deriving from the Hebrew word to attach, to hang on. How are you a part of a group or a clique? This person wants to be included to be part of a pack, and so when the gossip starts, they consciously or unconsciously don't leave the group table. They don't speak up and say this conversation is inappropriate. They're seeking acceptance, but in the process lose their integrity.
Great. So this might not be the person that's instigating it, but they attach. They want to be included so badly that they join in the gossip for that wanting to belong or that group think. All right. Does someone want to read C for us? Yeah.
See. Baheret, deriving from the Hebrew word for brightness or clarity. How do you feel when you know more than others? This person usually knows more than others, yet sometimes they think they know everything. This person believes they know the motives of people before asking. They think, I know what type of person this is, and I already know how they will act and or why they are already acting in a certain way. They lack the humility to ask and to listen. Instead of picking up the phone and asking the person directly, they jump to conclusions. They now feel entitled to gossip about this person and situation. Their arrogance makes them judgmental.
Thank you. What do you have thoughts on this? Does anyone ever, you don't have to admit that if you've ever done this, but have you ever seen this in a TV show or in a movie? Any of these? Has anyone ever seen this? Especially number C, I feel like we've witnessed this a lot, how it can relate to A or B, but in C. Yeah.
One purpose of gossip, one reason people gossip is they put people down while they're gossip and they feel superior to who they're gossiping about.
Right.
So I think a lot of people fall under A.
Right. So it was shared here that a lot of people fall under A, where people gossip about someone to feel superior. And then we also have someone else.
I mean, for B, like I never started a food fight, but I can't say I've thrown like 0 grapes in school kind of thing. I think like that kind of participation undercover, I've definitely been part of that and seen that a lot.
Thank you for sharing such a vulnerable share, and we'll definitely hide the grapes from you that are here at this Sudat sheet, and there's olives. But there's something about peer pressure, group think. We might not be the one who started, we might not be the second person, but once it's going, it's kind of like a snowball, and it's easy to get caught in the avalanche.
It's like a skin thing too, right? It's like if you don't stop it, like a skin affliction, if it can be shared. So like if you don't stop it with the first person, then it spreads, right?
So just about in general pandemics or in terms of diseases that are contagious. And it's interesting, the term for if someone does have a spiritual dermatology, they have to be in bidud or quarantine. And during the pandemic, that same term was used in Israel from people to have to quarantine if they had been exposed to someone with COVID for a time period after they had COVID or if they had traveled internationally. So. And I just to bring up also would see how this can happen too is like if they're involved with A or B, see, you might have this idea that I already know what someone's thinking. I'm not even going to ask them. I already am going to judge their bad behavior without asking them to explain their actions, or maybe I misunderstood, or maybe I only heard half a conversation, or maybe like the game of telephone, I heard it incorrectly. So you can see how C can be built on the A and B, and how easy it is for us to think we know better. We've already made our, like we've judged a book by its cover. We've already seen maybe it's to our benefit to see someone in a certain light or certain way, and how that can be connected to our arrogance. And how that can be problematic. So I have a question. Who was the first person to have Sarat in the 5 books of Moses? I heard over here Miriam. She's number 2. But who was number 1 in the 5 books of Moses to be inflicted with this skin condition? Exactly, Moses. You might be wondering, Moses, it's called the 5 books of Moses. How was he the first person that was inflicted with this? So before we look at that source, I want us just to look at something even before that in box number 4. Remember I said that it's an honor when you get a chance to meet with the priest, to have this one-on-one session. So not everyone would necessarily have Sarat. You had to be of a certain level of Torah knowledge or certain level of spiritual awareness to be inflicted with it, so that you maybe should have known better, but you also had the opportunity to know better. It wasn't going to be inflicted on someone that was never given that chance. And the rabbis read into that, Hazal, based on when we look at box 1, where the first word Adam. So Adam is considered the perfect human. And we're going to look at now on box 4 how that is. How do we understand that to be that way? Does someone read for us either the Hebrew or English in box 4?
And God created humankind in the divine image, creating it in the image of God, creating them male and female.
Okay, so created in the image of God. That's how we know Adam is the perfect human, created male and female. And then if you can read the line right underneath.
And God saw all that had been made and found it very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the 6th day.
Beautiful. Okay, so this comes from verse 31 in Genesis chapter 1. And so it's Tov Ma'od. Usually after every day, it was just like, oh, it was good, Tov. But on the 6th day, it was Tov Ma'od. Now humans, or Adam, was not the only thing created on the 6th day, but it was an important factor on the 6th day. So that's how the rabbis draw conclusions that Adam was the perfect human and of this high level because Tov Ma'od, it was very good. So now we can understand a little bit more. How did Miriam and Moses get inflicted with this? There's also some very other famous people that are historical and of importance in our Jewish faith that had this, including King David. So it wasn't something that we have to say like, oh, they had this for, like, we don't want to gossip about someone who, God forbid, had it and being like, they're so bad, they got this condition, they can never redeem themselves. So we see the people we look up to the most had it. King David, Miriam, and Moses. So let's look at where it happened with Moses. So if we can look at box number 5. Someone want to read for us? Yeah.
Adonai said to him further, put your hand into your bosom. He put his hand into his bosom, and when he took it out, his hand was encrusted with snowy scales.
Yeah, snowy scales. Does anyone know where this happens? We have on here Exodus chapter 4, verse 6, but does someone know what is the scenario when this is happening? That Moses put his hand into his jacket, pulled his hand out, and it was covered with snowy scales. First person in the 5 books of Moses to have Sarat.
Came out on his hand.
It happened at the burning bush. You're going to be on my trivia team. At the burning bush. And I want us to notice something here. I bolded the word like snow, kasheleg. So this is really interesting because we had before here that it can be called a bright spot, like the parting of the sky when we have barat, but we don't hear any reference about being like snow. We have one can be whiter than the other, it can be a bright spot, but something here that is being listed like snow. What is snow? Frozen water. What was Moses saved by? The Nile River. So by speaking ill of another, his gift, his like this connection to water became frozen. And Moses also, we know, is saved by the Nile River, saved by water, but also splits the Reed Sea, also has this mastery over water. So here, by speaking ill of someone, and we're going to look at the source soon of what he actually had said, it's connected to arrogance, that his gift of water, which is like, we think of water as mayim, chayim, like this waters of life, we call our Torah as like mayim, it became frozen. So let's look at now about Miriam. What had happened with Miriam when she got sarat? So you were very close over here. You got number 2. Do you want to read about it? In box number 6.
As the cold withdrew from the tent, there was Miriam stricken with snow-white scales. When Aaron turned toward Miriam, he saw that she was stricken with scales.
Okay, great. Not great that it happened to her, but beautiful reading. And can I ask you there, what is bolded? What do you see similar in this source that we saw in the source above?
Sheleg. The sheleg.
Kasheleg, just like snow. So also Miriam, her condition was like snow. And does Miriam have any connection to water?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The wells.
Yeah, we have Miriam's well, people were saying. Yeah, so she has this gift with water. So also when she spoke ill of Moshe, she came from this place of arrogance. Her gift of water was frozen. So I think it's something beautiful to, not beautiful that it happened, but the beautiful concept to see is that the very thing that gives us our gift or makes us unique, when we step into this ideas of arrogance, or gossiping about another, or trying to put others down to lift ourselves up, we actually lose our gift. It actually makes our gift being stuck. So instead of that, almost as we can step into our gift fully, but when we step the other direction, our gift is frozen in time. Okay, so I want us to look back at to what exactly had Moses said that would have caused him to be the first person to be inflicted with this condition. Can anyone guess what happened at the burning bush before we look at box number 7? Anyone guess what could have Moses have said that would have made him be stricken with this condition? Because that's such a holy moment. He's having a one-on-one with God. Okay, so he had performance anxiety, but did he admit to God, hey, I'm nervous and scared? What instead did Moshe say? Okay, let's look at source number 7. Do you want to read it first?
I can read it, but I was going to say, I think he doubts his ability. He thinks or he imagines that nobody will believe him, I think, and so he's doing the third thing, which is the Baharit.
Okay. Also on my trivia team for Shabbat, we should have
Okay.
Exactly. So he doubts his ability, but instead of saying to God, I'm nervous, he says, what does he say in number 7?
But Moses spoke up and said, what if they do not believe me and do not listen to me, but say, Adonai did not appear to you?
Right, you totally got it correct. So he was doubting himself, and then he says, they won't believe me, right? So he has arrogance, exactly as you said, he already thinks he can imagine what's going to be in the minds of the people that he's going to save. So he speaks badly about all of the Israelites because he doesn't know if they'll believe him or not. And instead of admitting his own weakness or his own vulnerability to God, he has to put down someone else, and he has to say, I already know what they're going to think. I already know what they're going to do. So, and that's, I think it's so interesting. And he's the first person to have this skin condition. So, to hear this, I'm like, wow, it makes me feel a little bit better being, just a humble human that makes mistakes, because even Moses makes mistakes. Yeah.
But this story reveals that he was right to doubt all the Hebrews.
So after this experience, then God's like, well, actually, maybe they won't believe you. But what if he had not first said that they won't believe it? maybe there's somehow a self-fulfilling prophecy that comes about. So it's very interesting to think about about that. Or if even maybe you can already see the writing on the wall, something could happen. How can you still give people the opportunity to have choice for themselves or where they're going to decide? Because it might actually have a different outcome. So it seems like God's like, you think they won't believe you? Okay, so actually their workload's going to increase and then they really won't believe you. But then they're going to ask to be redeemed even more so. Because when he goes to Pharaoh, Pharaoh's like, because of you, they're going to also gather the straw now and not just to make it into bricks. So it's interesting. Okay, so in closing, I just wanted to look at the last source, and I just wanted to highlight when we call it a scaly affliction, that's how it's often translated, that it's not scales that we would think of on a fish. There's actually a different Hebrew word there. So all translation is a little interpretation, and all translation it can't always capture the essence of a word. So this is actually from the Torah portion we read today on Shabbat. If someone wants to read box 8.
את זה תאכלו מכל אשר במים, כל אשר לא תנפיר בכסת במים, בימים ובנחלים אותם תאכלו.
So you can hear in here the words are different for scales than when the previous text source that we read. So it's not like scales of a fish. It's that we're trying to figure out a way to translate this word. It's also said that often it was like dead flesh. It was like this idea between the living and the dead, that when you gossip or you have this arrogance, it's like you stepped in to the death and you're still living. So the idea we often think of pure and impure, living and unliving. So there's something that's going on there. And then it heals when you step back into life. So just we were talking about if you can have Miriam and Moshe had this gift of water, but when they gossiped, they actually froze it. It went from something flowing and alive to something, but we almost sometimes ice, it's like dead. So it's interesting. So in 2 minutes or less, does anyone have any thoughts about this? Or how during the counting of the Omer, can we work on refining our speech? And is this easier? Is this kind of hard? Is it a hard thing to do?
I have a question about the word sheleg. Do we know that sheleg does mean snow here? I mean, I know it means so in modern Hebrew, but are we sure?
Yeah, everything I saw that we believe it is snow. And it also seems interesting because these were desert dwellers. Had they ever seen snow before? But it was seen that if you, Mount Hermon has snow, and there's actually when they camp at the banks of the Reed Sea, they said they're camping in the direction of Saffon, which in the north, and this mountain. And so some people say they had the ability to see all the way to Mount Hermon and could see the snow. But I don't know if really if you're in Eilat or on the Sinai Delta, if you can actually see that far. But that's people knew that was the direction that they define as north based on Mount Hermon is what we have. It's hard to know if what is passed down as Jewish folklore or not, but it seems to be that this is to be snow. But it's a very good question because it probably was extra shocking for them as people that had lived in the desert, in Egypt, and then, even in Canaan beforehand, all this stuff is who sees snow and suddenly it's there. It would seem extra shocking or magical or horrifying to them. And it being that how they have these gifts that were frozen, they were no longer alive like living waters, they were dead. Any other thoughts? Is it easy not to get stuck in groupthink or not to gossip about other people, not to put other people down to feel better about yourself?
No, about Moses. He was a prince. He traveled throughout Egypt. He went way south where you had mountains and you had snow. So even if you didn't have snow locally, he was familiar with snow.
Yeah, beautiful. Very good. Yeah. Yeah. Over here we have.
I think it was really cool to think of arrogance as kind of stopping your flow of water. I think when you're giving and you're humble, you can kind of, things come to you, you give things away, and it just kind of flows. Interesting to think of the the dead skin as like this stoppage of energy. You can almost think of like the Chinese like qi kind of, just stopping the flow.
Yeah, I love how you referenced into other like cultures, if it's stopping the chi or if you have a blocked chakra. So when you do something that takes you out of alignment, you actually block your life force energy. And how that sometimes, you would think, oh, being humble, how am I going to prove myself to people? But actually being humble creates this like magnetism, this manifestation, versus you need to tell someone or try too hard for it. But it's not easy. I definitely know that I struggle with it. It's so easy when you're sitting around a table of people and someone's speaking negative about someone else. How do you really get up and walk away? Sometimes you're like, oh, they'll change the conversation in a sentence anyways, or in a minute. But this, I think, is asking us, how do we really refine our language and people around us? And how can we like give people a little awareness or nudge, but also not coming off like, hey, that's so bad you're talking about someone else, because then you're actually maybe thinking you're better than them and coming from a place of arrogance. So how do we work with each other? And so you can have maybe a chavruta that you can check in with during like the next few weeks. Like, how are you refining your speech? And you can be accountable with each other and share ideas. And I think it's also just comforting to know that some of our great leaders also struggled with it. So as we're struggling with it, not to be too hard on ourselves, to know that maybe part of the human condition sometimes is that we're not so careful with our words, but words are a gift. We saw that God created the world with words. So our words also create life.